Eddie Carter wiped the sweat off his brow, the faint scent of paint and wood glue filling the small garage. His fingers trembled slightly as he smoothed the sketch of a jacket onto the rough tabletop. To anyone passing by, it was just a cluttered corner in a sleepy small town, but for Eddie, it was a dream taking shape. He glanced at the faded photograph pinned to the wall. His grandmother Grace, young and radiant in a 1940s nurse's uniform, standing proud beside a row of soldiers. The stories she told, of sacrifice and hope during darker times, were his secret fuel. At 16, Eddie wasn't just dreaming. He was determined. The clothes he designed weren't flashy or loud. They whispered stories of a simpler, truer America. Denim jackets with hand-stitched patches, shirts inspired by vintage town fairs, colors faded like old memories. His family thought it was a passing phase. But Eddie felt it deep in his bones. This was his chance to build something that mattered. Outside, the evening settled in over the cracked sidewalks and weathered porches of their town. Eddie took a breath, knowing this quiet garage was the start of a journey that might just change everything. Grace Carter sat in her worn rocking chair by the window, the late afternoon sun casting soft gold across her silver hair. She watched Eddie move about the garage with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. She remembered when the town bustled with factories and families, a place where dreams didn't need permission. "Eddie," she called softly, her voice cracked but steady. "Come sit a spell." He wiped his hands on his jeans and obeyed. "You've got fire in you, boy. Reminds me of your grandpa, God rest him. Started out small, just like you. But it was the kindness in his heart that made folks believe." Her eyes twinkled as she spoke of the past, a time when neighbors looked out for one another, and sacrifices were never forgotten. Eddie listened closely, the weight of her stories settling deep inside him. Grace's tales of nurses tending wounded soldiers, of small acts that changed lives, struck a chord. "It's not just about making clothes," she said. "It's about sewing the fabric of this town back together." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket. In this moment, Eddie knew his dream wasn't just his own. It was a chance to honor family, history, and the people who'd been forgotten. Frank Carter's footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway, heavy with the weight of memories no one spoke aloud. Eddie's father was a man shaped by the Vietnam War, quiet, stoic, and often distant. The years had carved lines of regret and pain across his face, deeper than any wrinkle. In the kitchen, Frank poured himself a black coffee, the bitterness matching the memories that haunted him. He glanced toward the garage, where Eddie's voice sometimes carried through the walls. Hopeful, bright, a stark contrast to his own silence. Grace caught his eye, sensing the storm inside him. "He's got something, Frank," she said gently. "Don't let your past steal his future." Frank nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He wanted to believe, to support his son, but the wounds of his own battles made it hard to reach out. "I'm trying," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Eddie, unaware of the silent struggle, kept designing, dreaming, and hoping, holding on to the fragile thread that might one day pull his family back from the edges of loneliness and regret. The town square was quiet, the kind of stillness that settles just before dusk. The old diner's neon sign flickered weakly, and the chatter of familiar faces drifted softly from the local grocery store. Eddie and Lisa walked side by side down Main Street, their footsteps echoing a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Eddie, you really think people will buy your clothes?" Lisa asked, her voice gentle but curious. She'd been his best friend since elementary school, always his biggest supporter and fiercest critic. He smiled, eyes bright despite the doubts crowding his mind. "Not just buy. I want them to feel something when they wear it. Like they're part of a story, ours." Lisa nodded. "I believe in you. But don't let the town's smallness box you in. You've got to reach beyond these streets." Eddie looked up at the fading sky. The world outside their quiet town felt huge and unkind, but his dream was growing bigger every day. With Lisa's faith and Grace's stories in his heart, he knew he was ready to take that first step, no matter how rocky the road ahead. Back in the garage, Eddie sat cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, threading a needle with trembling fingers. Around him were piles of fabric, soft denim, faded cotton, patches sewn from old clothes, each piece holding a memory, a story. He recalled Grace's gentle voice, reminding him how every stitch mattered. It wasn't just sewing clothes, it was weaving hope into something tangible. The hours slipped by unnoticed as Eddie worked late into the night, fueled by determination and dreams bigger than his small town. Suddenly, the garage door creaked open. Frank stood there, silhouetted against the porch light, watching his son in silence. "You're serious about this, huh?" Frank's voice was rough, but not unkind. Eddie looked up, heart pounding. "I have to be." Frank stepped inside, the distance between them shrinking just a little. "Don't let this world chew you up like it did me," he warned quietly. "But I'll help where I can." In that small garage, under the glow of a single bulb, a fragile bridge began to form, one stitch at a time. The next morning, Eddie woke to the sound of soft knocking on the garage door. Pulling it open, he found Mr. Jenkins, the kindly owner of the local general store, holding a small cardboard box. "I hear you're starting something special, Eddie," Mr. Jenkins said, smiling beneath his gray mustache. "Thought you might need some supplies. Fabric, thread, a few buttons, on the house." Eddie's eyes widened, heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Mr. Jenkins nodded. "You remind me of this town's spirit, scrappy, hopeful, and kind. We need more of that around here." As Mr. Jenkins left, Eddie looked around the cluttered garage and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this dream wasn't so impossible after all. Kindness like this, he realized, was the thread that could hold everything together. And with that, Eddie rolled up his sleeves, ready to stitch not just clothes, but the fabric of a community longing to be reborn. That night, Eddie lay on his bed, the ceiling fan humming softly above. Doubts crept in like unwelcome shadows. What if this never works? What if I'm fooling myself? He heard the creak of the stairs and Grace's slow footsteps. She sat beside him, her hand warm on his shoulder. "Fear's a visitor, Eddie. Doesn't mean you have to invite it to stay," she said gently. "I've seen dreams crushed by war and time, but I've also seen second chances bloom from the ashes." Eddie swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her years, the battles she'd fought, the loneliness she'd endured. "Promise me one thing," she whispered, "that no matter what happens, you'll keep being kind. Kindness never goes out of style." Her words settled deep within him, a quiet courage growing in the darkness. He nodded, ready to face whatever came next, holding on to the hope that kindness could heal even the deepest wounds. The next day at school, Eddie's quiet confidence was tested. In the lunchroom, a group of kids snickered as he pulled out a folded flyer showcasing his new clothing line. "Who's gonna buy that junk?" sneered one boy, stepping closer. "You think you're gonna be the next big thing? Dream on, Carter." Eddie's heart pounded, cheeks burning with shame and anger. Before he could respond, Lisa stood up, voice steady and fierce. "Maybe you're just scared someone your age can make something real. Eddie's not just dreaming, he's working, and you're just tearing him down." The room fell silent. Eddie looked at Lisa, grateful for her unwavering support. Later, as they walked home, Eddie confided, "Sometimes it feels easier to give up." Lisa shook her head. "The bigger the storm, the stronger the roots. You've got to keep growing." In the shadows of their small town, Eddie felt the harsh winds of doubt, but also the steady hand of friendship guiding him forward. Weeks passed, and Eddie's little garage operations slowly grew. One afternoon, a black pickup rumbled to a stop outside the Carter house. Eddie glanced up, surprised to see Mr. Wallace, the town's retired war veteran and owner of the local hardware store, stepping out. "I heard about your clothing line, kid," Mr. Wallace said, walking up with a weathered smile. "Reminds me of when I started my own business after the service. Grit, heart, and a whole lot of late nights." Eddie wiped his hands on his jeans, feeling a surge of respect. "Thanks, sir. It's been tough." Mr. Wallace nodded thoughtfully. "I've got some old sewing machines and tools you might find useful." I can lend them to you. Also, I'll spread the word at the Veterans Hall. Folks around here could use something hopeful to rally behind. Eddie's chest tightened. Here was someone who understood sacrifice and second chances, offering help without strings. Thank you. I won't let you down. As Mr. Wallace climbed back into his truck, Eddie realized his dream wasn't just his own anymore. It belonged to the whole town, to every person who believed in a second chance. Just as Eddie's momentum began to build, trouble crept quietly. One morning, a letter arrived with a stern warning. A larger clothing company had noticed his designs and accused him of copying their trademark. Eddie's heart sank. He sat at the kitchen table, the letter shaking in his hands. Frank entered silently, reading over his shoulder. This is serious, son. They could shut you down. Eddie looked up, defiant but scared. But I didn't steal anything. These designs, they're from our town, from our stories. I'm not giving up. Frank sighed, the walls between them trembling. We'll fight this. Together. Grace joined them, her voice steady. Justice isn't always easy, but kindness and truth will always find a way. That night, the family sat together, united in a battle far bigger than clothes, one about standing up for who they were, and what they believed in. The days that followed were a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and late-night meetings in the cramped garage. Eddie, with his father and Grace by his side, prepared to defend not just his clothing line but the spirit behind it. You're not alone, Eddie, Frank reminded him during one tense moment. This town's tougher than any suit in a boardroom. With Lisa's help, Eddie gathered testimonials from local customers, veterans, and seniors who found comfort and pride in his designs. Mr. Jenkins donated space in his store window for Eddie's clothing, a small but powerful act of support. As word spread, the community's backing grew louder, turning skepticism into hope. The legal threat still hung heavy, but the true battle was for respect, for a boy's dream, for a town's pride. Through sacrifice and steadfast kindness, Eddie learned that sometimes, winning meant standing tall in the storm, no matter how fierce the winds. One evening, after a long day of phone calls and sewing, Frank found Eddie alone in the garage, staring at a half-finished jacket. The silence between them was thick, but Frank finally spoke, voice softer than Eddie had ever heard. I wasn't always the man I wanted to be, Frank said, eyes distant. War took more from me than I ever understood back then. I pushed you away because I thought that's what strength meant. Eddie swallowed hard, heart aching. I just wanted you to believe in me. Frank reached out, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. I do now. I'm proud of you, kid. More than you know. In that quiet moment, years of pain and distance began to unravel. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a start, a second chance between father and son, stitched together by understanding and love. Grace's health had been waning, and one crisp autumn afternoon, Eddie found her resting by the window, a soft smile on her lips as golden leaves drifted outside. I've lived a long life, Eddie, she said quietly, and I've learned that the greatest legacy isn't wealth or fame. It's the kindness we pass on, the chances we give each other to grow and heal. She reached into her shawl pocket, pulling out a small, worn box. Inside lay a delicate locket, engraved with the town's name. This belonged to your mother. I want you to have it. Let it remind you of where you come from, and why you must keep going, no matter how hard it gets. Eddie clutched the locket, feeling the weight of generations and the unspoken love that bound them. Thank you, Grandma. I won't let you down. Her eyes shone with quiet pride, the light of 1,000 stories guiding him forward. Word of Eddie's struggle and spirit spread like wildfire through the town. One Saturday morning, the old community hall, once dusty and forgotten, buzzed with activity as veterans, seniors, and townsfolk gathered. Eddie stood at the front, nervous but determined, unveiling a new line of clothing inspired by local history and worn with pride. The crowd responded with cheers and tears, recognizing themselves in every stitch and color. Mr. Wallace approached, handing Eddie a folded American flag. This town's been through its share of battles. he said, voice steady. "But today, you've given us a new reason to stand tall." Frank, standing beside Grace, smiled for the first time in years. The walls between them weren't just crumbling, they were gone. In that moment, a small town found its heartbeat again, woven together by a boy's dream and a community's kindness. Just when things seemed to settle, Eddie received news that the big company wasn't backing down. They'd launched a campaign to discredit his brand, spreading rumors that the designs were stolen, that the town's support was just sympathy. The tension crushed the joy that had begun to bloom. Lisa paced the garage, frustration burning in her eyes. "They're trying to break us, Eddie. But they don't understand what this means to everyone here." Eddie clenched his fists. "We can't fight dirty. We have to show them who we really are. Through kindness, honesty, and hard work." Frank stepped forward, his voice firm. "We'll face them head on. No shortcuts." The battle was far from over, but Eddie and the town stood united, ready to prove that true justice isn't just in the courts, but in hearts and actions. Late one evening, the garage was dim except for a small lamp casting warm light on Eddie's latest designs. He was tired, his hands raw, his spirit bruised, but he kept going. Grace sat nearby in her chair, frail but steady. "You remind me of the river, Eddie," she said softly. "Slow, steady, carving through stone over time." Eddie smiled, exhaustion fading for a moment. "Sometimes it feels like I'm fighting alone." "You're never alone," she whispered. "Every stitch you make, every kindness you show, it flows through this town and beyond." Her words wrapped around him like a gentle tide carrying him through the darkest nights. It was quiet strength, patience, and love, the real foundation of his dream. One afternoon, as Eddie was sorting through orders in the garage, the doorbell rang. To his surprise, a sharply dressed woman stepped inside, holding a business card. "Mr. Carter? I'm Claire Reynolds, a buyer for a national boutique chain. We've been following your story, your designs, your commitment to community. We'd like to feature your line in our stores." Eddie blinked, disbelief and excitement swirling inside him. "But I'm just starting out. I'm not sure." Claire smiled warmly. "That's exactly why we want to help. Authenticity like yours is rare. We believe in second chances, and in giving people like you a platform." He glanced toward Grace, who gave a small nod of approval from her chair. This offer wasn't just a business deal. It was a chance to show the world the heart behind the clothes. Eddie took a deep breath, ready to step into a bigger future. With the new partnership on the horizon, Eddie found himself reflecting on the past more than ever. One afternoon, Frank invited him to sit on the porch, the warm sun filtering through the old oak trees. "Son," Frank began, voice steady but soft, "I never told you how proud I was of your grandma. She gave so much, even when life was cruel. She taught me about kindness when I thought only toughness mattered." Eddie looked at his father, the walls between them finally fading. "I'm proud of her, too. And proud to be part of this family." Frank sighed, a weight lifting. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you sooner. But it's never too late to try." Together, they sat in silence, 2 generations of scars slowly healing, bound by love, forgiveness, and the promise of new beginnings. The day Grace passed was quiet, peaceful. Surrounded by family, her last breath was a whisper of love and hope. At her bedside, Eddie held her hand, tears tracing paths down his cheeks. "You showed me how to dream, Grandma. How to keep going." Frank stood close, his own eyes glistening. "She gave us a second chance, one we won't waste." The community gathered for her funeral, sharing stories of a woman who had lived through wars, loss, and loneliness, yet never lost her kindness. Her legacy wasn't just in the past, but in Eddie's dream, a dream that had grown into a beacon for the town, for family, and for anyone who needed hope. Years later, Eddie stood in a bustling studio far from the quiet streets of his hometown. His clothing line had grown beyond anything he'd imagined, but the heart of it remained rooted in that small garage, those stories, and the people who believed in second chances. He looked at the framed photo of Grace, hanging proudly on the wall, and whispered, "We made it, Grandma." But success wasn't measured in sales or fame. It was in the kindness he paid forward, the community he helped rebuild, and the love stitched into every garment. Eddie knew life would always bring storms, but with hope, sacrifice, and the strength of family, any dream, no matter how small, could change the world. And as the sun set on another day, Eddie smiled, ready for whatever came next.